Hello dear friends. Truth is like the sun. You can block it out for a while, but it will not disappear. The world will not wake up until it descends into hell from its deep sleep. Opinion piece. The death of money. James Rickards' opinion. Conspiracy against the dollar. The Sandman Project. Collapse of the financial system. Economic freeze situation. The rules of the game must be changed. Controlled demolition of the economy. Rickards predicts the collapse of the system. The cover would be the war in Ukraine. Let's start. We are potentially entering an Ice Nine situation in which the entire world could freeze economically, said economist James Rickards, author of the New York Times best-selling book The Death of Money. The coming collapse of the international monetary system. Rickards uses a metaphor alluding to a book by Kurt Vonnegut, The Cat's Cradle. In the book, a vial of Ice Nine, a liquid that has a freezing point at room temperature, seeps into streams and rivers and turns all the water to ice, covering the planet in an ice age and wipes out all life. At the end of one scenario, the entire world financial system shuts down. What would be the cover for this engineered collapse? The big crack. Something similar could be happening financially when markets stop trading, he said. In quotes, if the New York Stock Exchange closed and I couldn't sell my stocks and get cash, sell or redeem my money market funds, then you'd have to shut down the money market fund industry, and then people would say, okay, I'll go to the banks or ATMs, and then they have to shut down the banks. So the point is you end up shutting down the whole system. Rickards noted that contrary to conventional economic thinking, now is not the bad time to own gold. People say gold does well in inflation, and you don't want to own gold in deflation. And we may be looking at deflation, which may be coming, but what I mean is the greatest period of sustained deflation in history was from 1927 to 1933. And in that period, gold went up to 75%, he said. Gains in gold under current conditions would be ever greater. Rickards said since gold was fixed in 1933, which is no longer the case today. In addition, Rickards said investors should store their gold a bike ride away, so that in a worst-case scenario, it would be accessible if people need to evacuate cities by bike, which would be more effective during a traffic jam than cars. He opined that previous financial collapses have not meant the end of the world. People didn't go to caves and started eating canned goods. The momentary collapse meant that the major financial and trading powers of the time sat around a table and rewrote what they called the rules of the game, which is shorthand for the workings of the international monetary system. Countdown to the collapse of the petrodollar by Mike Adams. The Sandman Project described an agreement over 100 nations that, when activated, will cause those nations to simultaneously dump the dollar and abandon the petrodollar status that has allowed the US to enjoy 50 years of material abundance, according to Mike Adams. The collapse of the monetary system awaits the world in the near future, says financial expert James Rickards. Russia and China's desire to free the dollar from its status as the global reserve currency is an early sign of the increasingly inevitable crisis. According to James Rickards, ICE 9 scenario, when this decision is activated, the dollar and all dollar-denominated assets would plummet to near zero literally overnight. This means that all dollar-denominated bank accounts, bonds, pension funds, treasuries, and other investment vehicles would be worth essentially zero, for the simple reason that all banks and markets would freeze their operations. Any funds you have in the stock market would be trapped in those markets, and the entire banking and financial infrastructure would suffer a liquidity crisis that would freeze almost all financial transactions. Credit cards would cease to function, food-stamped systems would collapse to ATMs wouldn't work, bank transfers would stop, checks would not clear, and banks would appear offline when accessed via the internet, displaying maintenance messages to panicked users. Deliberate plan. The dollar collapse would be a deliberate plan to force the hungry masses into a digital dollar control network. This scenario would have been designed for a deliberate collapse of fiat currency and an attempt to force everyone into a digital currency system run by the bankers. In the panic, citizens would be promised a universal basic income and rationed food credits, but only if they used the digital wallet system approved by and operated by the same people who reduced the value of the dollar. Desperate people would comply and sell their soul and freedom in exchange for a few more meals, while their future would be destroyed by a financial system that would keep them enslaved and impoverished forever. When the petrodollar collapsed and the banks froze, riots would begin in every major city. Total chaos would reign as the desperate, unaware, and unsuspecting masses kill each other while trying to find food, water, and ammunition. The collapse of the rule of law would be surprisingly rapid, and no police unit would make a dent in a national chaos. Only rural areas would be safe, as local citizens and law enforcement would work together to protect local communities from waves of refugees and the violent gangs spreading from the cities. Justice would be swift for looters, rapists, and human traffickers, while local churches would be overrun by refugees formerly living in the cities. Economy. The stock market rises after a tightening of monetary policy. Second, stocks deliver best weekly performance since November 2020. Third, S&P 500 rises 6.15% for the week, the best in 2 years. Fourth, big tech stocks rise to the highest since April 2020 after the Fed's embark on a modest rate hike. Fifth, Wall Street closes higher after the end of the Biden's talks, and oil stabilizes. Sixth, the dollar fell on Thursday and touched its lower level in a week. Seventh, two top Fed officials call for higher interest rates to quell inflation. Eighth, the Fed risks losing credibility against inflation without further rate hikes, members say. Markets. First, gold rebounds after the dollar's slide. Second, Brent crude oil falls nearly 4% on the week. Third, gasoline and diesel again break records despite the drop in oil. Fourth, the Fed is about to inflate before it explodes. Fifth, the stagflation trap could lead to universal basic income and food rationing, according to Brandon Smith. Sixth, Klaus Schwab talks about humankind as hackable Animals. Golden standard. First, Putin has announced that the ruble is now on yesterday's gold standard. Second, will all countries in the world follow now that Russia and China have declared that they are backed by gold and verified solid assets? Third, the fiat dollar would have to exit the banking system to implement the financial reset. Fourth, the dark side is imploding from a worldwide COVID operation. Fifth, the US continues to deplete its strategic oil reserve. The reserve will last 33 days at current demand. Sixth, financial heresy. High inflation would erase debt and bring a jubilee. We have seen moderate inflation in recent decades, but the debt burden has grown exponentially. But in periods of flying inflation, inflation wipes out debt. China locks up 50 million citizens. Second, China reduces income tax for small businesses to 20%. Third, if China supported Russia, there would be consequences, said Biden to Xi in their first meeting since November. Cryptocurrencies. First, cryptocurrencies see gains after Fed rate hike. Second, Cardano cryptocurrency rises more than 3% in 24 hours. Third, Australia sues Facebook for misleading cryptocurrency advertising. Spain. First, Spain and Italy prepare an alternative pipeline in the face of the MidCat blockade. Second, each Spaniard will pay 700 euros more in income tax because of inflation. Third, on the verge of a shortage of sunflower oil in the Canaries of Spain, which before the war came from the Ukraine. Fourth, Spain supports Morocco's proposal for Saharan autonomy. South America. The Brazilian government is asked to protect isolated indigenous people from loggers in the Amazon. Second, Peru presents the fossil of a cetacean more than 36 million years old. Russia. First, Russian ruble falls in Moscow, down almost 25% in 4 weeks. Second, Russian banks are so broke they will issue cryptocurrencies. Third, US sanctions on Russia accelerate de-dollarization and help the yuan rise. Fourth, the Russian military has resorted in Ukraine to the Soviet tactic of heavy artillery. Fifth, Putin justifies the invasion of Ukraine to prevent genocide in the Donbass. Sixth, crowd bathed by President Putin at the patriotic rally in Moscow's Olympic Stadium in front of some 200,000 people. Seventh, Russia begins the rapid dispersal of its cultural treasures due to the war. Eighth, Russia warns Bosnia that if it joins NATO, there will be a response from Moscow. Ukraine. First, more than 130 people rescued in Mariupol, but there are still hundreds more under the rubble. Second, Russia is ready to let the militants leave Mariupol to save civilians. Third, foreign mercenaries in Ukrainian hospital executed by Zelensky's forces. Fourth, defiant Odessa looks vulnerable to Russian maritime assault. Europe. First, European stock markets post their best week since November 2020. Second, European stock markets erase all losses since the war in Ukraine began. Third, inflation rises 6.2% in the European Union due to energy prices. Fourth, European Union condemns attacks on civilians in Ukraine. Fifth, the European Union proposes to create a solidarity fund for Ukraine. Sixth, European Union countries sign agreement for Frontex to help Moldova with refugees. Seventh, Borrell laments the consequences for the Russian of leaving the Council of Europe. 8. NATO begins in Norway its large-scale exercises 200 kilometers from Russia. 30,000 soldiers from more than 25 countries in Europe and North America are taking part. 9. US military plane with 4 people on board crashes in Norway. Asia. India rebukes the US for threatening it against Russian oil imports. Second, Bangladesh demands 22.4 million after missile hits its ship in Ukraine. Messages. Deliberating ignorance. Those two words describe the planet. Ignorance, deliberate, willful and unconscious effort to ignore any and all logic, facts and truths. That pretty much sums up the sheep mentality. Absolute laziness is the new normal mentality. Whatever the media said would be absolute truth. It should be true. If it was on TV, it should be true. Anything else would be fake news. Second, Pleiadian message by Christine Day. This is a moment of divine synchronicity on Earth as an energetic phase of the next step begins. The magnetic core of the planet is ready to go through a series of expansive changes, which are designated to reposition the Earth in relation to the Sun. The Sun has two phases. One phase brings light, warmth and nourishment to the planet. The second phase holds a reflected illumination of the light of your higher self. We refer to the second phase of the Sun as the sacred Sun. Third, current energies by Celia Feng. Energy is pouring in. We can expect this to continue for most of the week as we head into the equinox shift over the weekend. We are returning to our connection with our multidimensional self. A genetic code is being activated. Our original angelic humankind template is humming, and our new light-bodied template is vibrating. Such a powerful integration is happening now as we head towards the equinox, where we will balance all these energies. Much rest and much self-care is required. This is not the time to move on. Just flow gently. Fourth, we are all chosen. Telling others that they are chosen above all others is like the people of Earth series, where they tell abductees that they are special. No one is more special than anyone else. Identity in the higher realms is not important. So to promote the importance of self is to establish one's character and spiritual evolution. All of this is spiritual ego, chinks in one's armor where invisible negative entities can enter. Do you think all the dictators of the past and present world through they were special, the chosen ones? Did they seek power over others instead of serving and empowering others? Were they themselves trying to regain their power from those who made them believe they had lost it? And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friend.